read the Bible every day for the rest of my life. Just start to read it. Start somewhere. And so we try to make it really practical and simple for you. Last week, we kicked off the series, TikTok Theology, where we're talking about a number of different things. And specifically, we want to kind of lay a foundation of why we believe the things that we believe, and how last week we talked about how we form beliefs. If you missed that, that's on YouTube. It's a shorter message that you can go back and watch. But we kind of talked about this idea of that we all have different beliefs and different reasons for those beliefs. And what happens then is we, in our mind, we have opinions, we have thoughts, we have worldviews, we have beliefs, and we try to share those with people in different ways. And oftentimes what we do is we think when I give you my opinion or share my thought or share my worldview on something, I feel like I'm handing you this, like a baseball, like it's fixed, it's solid, it is what it is. If I toss this to you and you toss it back to me, I'm still gonna get a baseball back. But we learned last week that when we share something, when we put something out there, whether it's through conversation or on the social media platforms, when we put something out there, it often is not like this, but it is truly far more like this. And this is Play-Doh. Okay, and it can be squished and it can be molded and it can be formed. And when you give this to somebody, you think you're handing them this, that they're gonna receive exactly what you sent with the intent that you sent it and the motive that you had behind it. But actually what's gonna happen because of their beliefs and their worldviews and their upbringing and their experiences and their community that they've surrounded themselves with, they instantly take what you've said or take what they experience from you and they start to mold it into something that confirms oftentimes their biases, that confirms the things that they already believe. And none of us can really escape this. This is just something that we naturally do. When we get good information, it often affirms the good that we want to hear. When we get hard information, it affirms the hard things that we didn't want to hear. And we mold it and we shape it through the lens that we look at life. It's why you can, again, like I shared this last week, you can have people who hear the same conversation, yet come to completely different conclusions, right? Any of you married? Any of you thought you were communicating this, but what they heard was this, okay? Where they took what you heard, like this happened just this last week, is I said something and I didn't realize it. I thought I was saying this, and my wife took this, and I didn't know that my words hurt her. I didn't know that they upset her a little bit. And so I just went along with my day. I didn't know she was still thinking about it. And because it wasn't registering for me. And then later she's like, hey, I want you to know that when you said that, that actually hurt me. And she like, what did I say? And then she repeats back what I said. And this is how it made her feel. And I didn't focus on her feelings because I'm taking what she said now and I'm starting to mold it and form it through my beliefs and in my way. And so I'm not even focusing on how she felt. I'm just simply now like, well, I didn't say that. And I'm really tempted to get defensive here because that might be part of the words I said, but it certainly wasn't the spirit in which I said it, right? Because I didn't intend for her to take it and mold it, just like now I'm taking what she's telling me and I'm molding it, and I could get defensive or I could be actually a little bit more understanding, to lean in with curiosity. If you're in a relationship for very long, you know that curiosity is very helpful. To lean into the conversations that are difficult, to lean into differences, and to ask questions and to consider things from their perspective. A lot of times we don't do that because heck, we're right and they're wrong. And so why do I have to learn from them? They just need to learn that they need to be right like me. And this would be a lot more simple, but all of us are molding and shaping the things around us. And then you experience something from someone, and what you experience maybe hurts you or offends you, and you look at it through your worldview, and then you make a decision about them. This is why doing what I do up here on a Sunday can be really difficult. A lot of times what I do up here on a Sunday and I say something, a lot of you show up and you can hear what I say, and you can feel like it's a nice like pat on the back for already believing all the right stuff. Like, good job. You know, like, yeah, good job, Tony. You affirm what I already believe. You're right like me, Tony. Sometimes you come in and you get a little bit more challenged, or you get a little offended and you don't like what I maybe have to say, or when I thought I was giving you this, you mold it into this, and instead of leaning in with curiosity and deeper understanding, you make a judgment and you say, oh, that church is no good, or he's a heretic, or he's too conservative, or he's too liberal, right? You just make decisions because we're all molding the information as we get it. We all have a worldview and a lens in which we see things that our beliefs have been shaped by. And so you experience one thing and you make a judgment about it. Here's what's fascinating. And I think if you could hear this, and not just hear it, but understand this, it could change a lot for you. This is in your notes. It's the first fill in the blanks here. I think this is so key, is that we judge others by their actions and we judge ourselves by our motives. So when I said something to my wife, I did not mean it to be, I thought I actually said it playful, and she's like, you didn't laugh at all. But I knew my heart, I knew my motive, I knew my intention behind it, right? We judge others by their actions, and we judge ourselves by our motives, which means that when we experience something from somebody else and they fall short in some way, it is so easy to be like, they're wrong. They were bad. They did it wrong. They were mean. They're on the wrong side of this. Right? But yet when we do something and maybe we hurt someone else's feelings or we do something that wrongs them in some way, we're like, yeah, but I didn't mean to. That wasn't my intention. It's not like I woke up today and said, I'm going to be evil today. I didn't mean to get in the car wreck, right? You instantly go down the paths of like, well, I was distracted. I saw a bird. I saw like something, and you have excuses because you didn't mean to. You give yourself so much grace because you will judge yourself by your motives. And your motives are, most of the time, most of us have pretty pure motives. We don't wake up thinking like, I'm going to do harm today. For the most part, you're a good human that wants good to come to yourself and to other people. And yet when you experience the wrong side of that, we are quick to point fingers and judge other people. And we're actually ignorant because while we understand our motives and our intentions, we don't understand theirs. So again, we judge by what we experience, we judge by their action, but give ourselves extra credit, extra grace, because we understand our motives. What if we could lean in with curiosity? What if we could lean in with better questions? What if we could lean in to seek understanding, rather than leave us in a position where we actually just might be ignorant? We might not know the full story. There's always two sides of any argument, right? There's two sides of a story, there's even multiple sides of a story. So there's different ways that we might experience some ignorance and not even realize it. So I'm gonna give you some examples. I'll start off a little lighthearted, maybe get a little more to the point. But like this, here's a couple examples of how you might be ignorant. You might be ignorant if you have a strong opinion about a movie that you've never seen because somebody that you trust told you it was a bad movie. Oh, I wouldn't go see that movie, it's bad. Have you seen it? No, I wouldn't. But do you know anything about it? No, I don't, but someone I know knows. And you might be ignorant, okay? You might be ignorant because you believe that all media is biased and somehow all the media you consume is also confirming what you believe. You might be ignorant. Let's go a little bit deeper. You might vote your party line because you feel like that party is what is good for you and good for your country. However, you have no idea how to articulate why the other party is also doing what they do and why they think it's good for them and good for their country. If you think the other party is an enemy, you might be ignorant. You might be ignorant if you are certain that you are going to go to your view of Christian heaven. However, you have no way of knowing. You have never gone down paths of exploring what Muslims believe about Jannah or what Jehovah's Witnesses believe about paradise or what Buddhists believe about nirvana. You might be ignorant. And I'm not saying, none of this is to say you're wrong, but to say that I know that I know that I know, and I'm on the right side of history on this, and I'm standing on the corner of truth, and you need to stand on this corner with me, or you are wrong, and you are the enemy. It's us versus them now. You might be ignorant. You might be ignorant if you have strong opinions about a Bible verse, but you've never even read it in its context. You might be ignorant if you're convinced that everyone should be on the keto diet, yet you can't explain ketosis. You might be ignorant if you can't explain the difference between a contrail and a chemtrail. You might be ignorant. There are things we often just want to affirm the things that we already believe that align with us. And your algorithm, when it comes to whatever social media platforms you are on, are not helping you. They are only helping you concretely confirm what you already believe. They are learning things about you, and your algorithm is just showing you and revealing you over and over again, quietly feeding you things that will confirm what you already believe. And so we live in a tough culture where we think we're open thinkers, but we're actually being fed something that leads to us being closed-minded. Having beliefs and convictions is fantastic. You should know what you believe. And hear this, more important than what you believe, you should know why you believe it. Why do you believe the things that you believe? And perhaps it's just something that was handed to you, and what your parents thought they were handing you was this, and what you actually received is this, because your parents say, hey, we're gonna go to church every Sunday, and we're gonna read the Bible as a family, we're gonna serve in church, but yet your mom and dad always fought behind closed doors, and they always undermined you, so they think they're handing you a solid faith, but what you're really getting is this pliable, like this moldable thing that you're like, I don't know if I could even believe in the God that my parents talk about, because they're so inconsistent in their own life. You might be ignorant if you're only shaping your life and your beliefs through the things that you are already convinced of, and you don't have an open mind. Think of it like this, okay? If you've been a Christian for a long time, if you're new here today, this conversation is like, yeah, Tony, this makes sense. If you've been around church for a long time, this conversation is uncomfortable because you've probably been really steady in your beliefs. And I'm not here to rock your beliefs or to rock the boat of your beliefs. I'm just asking you, if you want other people to engage in a conversation with you where you can share your beliefs, your worldview, your opinions, where you can share your faith, and you want them to engage and lean in with curiosity and have an open mind to the things that you know are true for you, and you can't do that for them, you might be ignorant. You might be one-sided. You might not be helping the people around you. We as Christians, and I'm guilty of this, we can have a bad rap of trying to convince people of our truth, but we're not even willing to meet them with where they're at with what they believe to be true in that moment. And I think if we're gonna be honest about ourselves and be able to really know why we believe the things we believe, we've gotta dig a little deeper and not just bury our head in the sands about what the people around us might believe. If we can't also lean in, and I'm not saying that you're going to compromise, that you're going to give up your beliefs, or you're on like some slippery slope to some progressivism, or that's not at all. I'm just saying, give the person that you're trying to help and you're trying to influence and impact their life, give them the same respect that you're hoping that they give you. Because if you don't, how are you any different than a bullhorn guy in the corner of a street just yelling turn or burn? How is it any different? So we have a job to do to meet people with where they are at. You ever talk to somebody who has an obviously like high view of themselves? Okay, where they like think really highly of themselves. Most of the time when we get in these conversations, we want to exit them just as quick as we got into them. Because obviously they don't want to hear from us. They are already the expert. They know all things, and and we don't even want to be in that. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament, he's got something to say about this. And I love this because the Apostle Paul was one of the biggest influencers in the first century. His writings went viral of that day. And so he's trying to help people understand what it actually means to follow Jesus, because they've heard of Jesus, they put their faith in Jesus, but like a lot of us, once you start there, it's sometimes we don't know what to do next, like what our next step is. And so Paul is speaking to followers of Jesus in different cities and different areas. In this case, he's gonna speak to them that are in Rome. And while they learned about this and benefited from this in the first century, we still benefit from the scripture today. And so here's what Paul says to the Christians living in Rome in chapter 12. He says this, he says, "For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you," by the grace given to me. I love that. I love that he's acknowledging that, because I don't think Paul's speaking to them as a know-it-all. I think Paul writes this line because he regularly feels inadequate and unworthy to have the leadership platform that he does. Because before Paul followed Jesus, Paul was a religious leader that was anti-Jesus. He was so convinced that he was right. And those people that are now following Jesus, when he was anti-Jesus, he was so convinced that those people that are now following this way of Jesus, this new thing that's happening, he was so convinced that that made them the enemy, and he had the power and the authority literally to eliminate them. And what do we do when we are right and someone else is wrong? We often divide. It's us versus them. It's right versus wrong. And so Paul did to followers of Jesus what a lot of us do in smaller ways. He divided. He imprisoned them, he had them beaten, he even had them killed. So if we were to call this what this literally is Paul was a religious terrorist. And then Paul encountered Jesus. And Jesus changed his life. God confronts Paul. God forgives Paul. And actually, he brings to Paul a brand new purpose. And Paul doesn't have to reject and deny his past. God actually redeems his past. And Paul's years and years of study in scriptures, in the Hebrew scriptures, that had led him to the point where he could be brutal against Christians. Now he's found Jesus in those same scriptures. And so these years of study, they're not wasted. He's now understood them more fully. And he's using that same study now to point people to Jesus. And he says, by the grace given me, one thing you'll notice about the writings of the Apostle Paul is that the longer he goes, the lower view of himself he has. And he's experienced grace upon grace. And Paul says this line, for the grace given to me, because he has a very big picture of what grace is. And then Paul goes on to say this. He says, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith that God has distributed to each of you. Paul's basically saying, hey, you might be like me, and you might think more highly of yourself than you ought to. And if you haven't noticed this, if you haven't been around faith for very long, the longer you are, one thing you're going to notice is that following Jesus often requires us to elevate our view of others and lower our view of ourselves. And one of the greatest enemies of this process is something that's called illusory superiority. Illusory superiority. It's the tendency most of us have to think of ourselves more highly than we really are, which is exactly what Paul is trying to help us with. So social psychologists say this is universal. Like none of us are immune to this. None of us get to escape this. Most of us at some point on some topic are going to struggle with illusory superiority, where we're quietly believing that we're better at something or we know more, that we are the advanced class than someone else. We are more advanced than we actually are. So this shows up in our estimates of our own intelligence, our own attractiveness, our job performance, even our rightness in legal matters. This is why so many people sue other people, because you always think you're gonna be right, okay? Or take people to court. It shows up in our own driving ability. It shows up in our popularity, and it shows up especially, they say it shows up especially in how immune to bias we are. So when we talk about confirmation bias, a lot of us can understand, and that's the idea that we're taking what we hear, taking what we experience, and we want to align it with the stuff we already believe, and oftentimes we're like, yep, that is something other people do. Right? We don't, but this illusory superiority says that our most universal bias is that we think we are the ones that are immune to bias, that is our bias, that we think we're the ones. The other examples are the University of Nebraska-Lincoln surveyed 90% of its faculty, its professors, and it said, or surveyed the whole staff, and 90% of their professors said that they are in the top half of all the professors at the university. And you don't need a bachelor's in mathematics to know that that's not possible. They can't all be in the top half, right? There's been studies done with US drivers, and again, about 90% of us say we're in the top half of driving in ability, that we're the good drivers, okay? And mathematically, it's impossible. Some of us shouldn't even be in the car. But when we believe something is true, man, we just continue to confirm it to ourselves. Have you ever believed that there's something so true and then you realize that you were absolutely wrong? Like I know just a while back, I was talking with some friends and I was sharing with them an experience I had when I was 7 years old. Is I was at home and I was chopping carrots, and I wanted to chop carrots like I had seen them chop on TV, like a chef that goes chop, 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 chop. You know, like that's really cool. And so I grabbed my carrot and I grabbed my knife and I held it up in the air not on a cutting board, but and I go chop, chop, and it hits the carrot and it slides and it slices my thumb like about 1.5 inches open, like could have cut my thumb off. And I was telling them a story about how I almost cut my thumb off and and I'm like, here, look, here's the scar, and I'm having a hard time finding the scar, but I'm like, here's, yeah, it's right there, and then it went all the way to there, and it was about a week later where I'm like, it was this hand. But I knew it was a true story, and I was so convinced, right, that I made up a scar on my hand. And we do this, right? Because we are so convinced of ourselves. When you know that something is true, there's nothing that's going to persuade you otherwise. And we lean into our biases, okay? And the problem is like when that's like a 25-year-old story, right? And it's about one hand versus the other hand, it's not a big deal. But when it's like person to person, face to face, or Facebook to Facebook, when it's disagreements, we believe this is true and you think it's wrong, and so now we're against you, like it matters how we handle these situations. The problem is that in our minds, other people sometimes are so wrong and we are so right. This is illusory superiority. And there's actually a name for it. Social psychologists actually found that this is so common that it's something that happens in so many people. And they also say that oftentimes the most ignorant people, let me just read this. They find that people who are sometimes the most ignorant on a specific topic are often the most blind to their ignorance on that topic. That they think they're the experts, which makes it really hard to confront them. It makes them very unteachable. It makes this really hard also to see this in ourselves because we have a higher view of ourselves than we really should. And so again, this pattern is so prevalent that it's got its own name. Its name is this, the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect. I think this is fascinating. The Dunning-Kruger effect says that the human default is to overestimate how much we know, and the most ignorant will overestimate the most. Here's the good news. If you know absolutely nothing on a topic, you are immune to this. Because when you know nothing, for the most part, you know that you know nothing. Okay, if you were to stumble into a conversation between brain surgeons and they're talking about this upcoming life-saving surgery they're gonna do to have to to carve out this tumor that's in someone's brain, and they're talking about the latest strategies and techniques to be used, and they happen to lean over to you and say, hey, what do you think about this? You'd be like, guys, I know nothing. I can't contribute. Like, I'm glad you're the experts. It sounds like you know what you're doing, right? Because you know that you know nothing. You would leave it up to them. But studies suggest that as soon as you know just a little bit on any given topic, your estimation of how much you know climbs way faster than your actual knowledge. That how much you think you know. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's kind of charted out like this. Okay, it's on a graph where knowledge goes one way, confidence goes up the other way, right? So the more you know, and here's how they chart it out right here. And you'll see in that bottom left corner, when you know nothing, you have very little confidence in any given topic, any given conversation, because you know that you know nothing. But once you have a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of information, you saw a YouTube video, you saw a TikTok, you saw a reel, you had a conversation, all of a sudden your confidence just skyrockets up there to the level of an expert. And they call that the peak of Mount Stupid. Do not elbow somebody right now, but anybody know somebody? Anybody can admit, I put a tent there and lived there for years. You know, like it's part of our experience that someone with a little bit of knowledge can have the same level of confidence as somebody that's actually an expert. And on the peak of Mount Stupid, very early in the process, this is your most judgmental self. Like, you think you're right about things. Your confidence is strong, but you're also still quite stupid. And many people just stay there. They pitch a tent, they build a cabin. Okay, a little bit of knowledge, a whole lot of confidence. And this is kind of a dangerous place to be. And of course, this is bad for the way of following Jesus, because people on the peak of Mount Stupid, when it comes to our faith, we assume we're right. Someone told us the Bible says this, and we've never read it for ourselves, but now we're spouting off all these things the Bible does or doesn't say, or condone or not condone, and we don't actually have a backbone to our faith. We know maybe what we believe, we just don't know why, and our confidence is high, and so we are on the peak of Mount Stupid. We've got to have a posture that says we're gonna lean in and we're gonna learn. Because when you're on that mountain, you're not doing Romans 12:3. You're doing the opposite. You are thinking of yourselves more highly than you ought to. And this creates friction, right? This is like the person, like nobody knows more about nutrition and dieting than somebody who just started a diet, right? Nobody, oh man, you gotta try this. This is incredible. A plant-based diet. Go vegetarian. You know, it'll change your life. Like your energy will be back. Your weight will loss. Your skin will clear up. You know, like, and they're like, well, what about protein? I want to build muscle. Have you seen horses? They only eat grass. Like, this is awesome. You should do this. Okay, you seem to know a lot about this. How long have you been doing it? Since yesterday, but it's made a difference. You know, we live there sometimes. We think we're experts. It's like a parent of a newborn that wants to give parenting advice to a parent that's got 3 kids of different ages. It makes sense because they're like in the game and they've got something to say. They've got an opinion. They want to be heard. But then you realize what happens. Can we pull up that slide, that graph one more time with the red line? What you realize, hopefully, where you get is that you come off the mountain and you gain more knowledge, and then you realize, like, holy smokes, I actually know nothing. I remember as a parent realizing that I knew nothing. I remember as a parent realizing to the point that do any parents actually know anything? Are we all making this up? And I remember being in that valley there where your knowledge is growing, but your confidence is not, because you're coming to grips with reality, right? You come to grips with where you're truly at with it all. As we keep learning, our confidence eventually kind of keeps going up and to the right. But when you're down in the valley, there's a humbling aspect to that. And what you'll notice is that people who get to that stage where they're back more in the expert field, they've got a whole lot of knowledge now. And there's a difference between someone on the peak of Mount Stupid and someone that's actually in an expert category. Because the person in the expert category, they're not up there trying to defend and tell you every reason why you're wrong and their view is right, because they've gone through the valley. They've gone through debates. They've gone through hard conversations and questioning and understanding why I believe the things that I believe. And so there's a calmness on the other side. There's a quietness to it as they've actually got there with a level of maturity that's come over time from real learning. Mount Stupid doesn't have that. Mount Stupid doesn't have this calmness. It's combative. It's the opposite of a peacemaker, because Mount Stupid just wants to correct people and persuade people, right? And the thing is, it's so fascinating to me when you, especially on the social media side of things, is Peak of Mount Stupid, it's kind of fun to watch. Anyone of you, you're like me, where you would secretly say, I really love social media debates. When someone else posts something, you're like, ooh, they posted that, they said that, and you go get the popcorn, and you're like, I'm gonna go down to the comments where angry people live, and I'm just gonna watch what unfolds, Anyone else because and then the people that are all on one side of an issue, they're angry and they're like, I can't believe you said that, you were so wrong, and they come out like an angry mob with pitchforks and torches, right? They're ready to battle this thing out on a feed, right? It used to be really hard for our voices to be heard. It used to be really hard for the people that are on the mountaintop to be heard, but now we live in a culture where everybody can have a voice, where everybody has a platform to put it out there. You used to have to write a book or get an article published or something to have an expert level voice. But now, because of our culture, you can just kind of put anything out there, and you might not even know if you believe it yet, but it's out there in the ethos, and it's like your voice is now equal with the actual experts. Because maybe you just happen to be good at making videos and you're posting all the time, and so the algorithm picks you up, and now you're getting in all the feeds, and it's like you're just as equally authoritative as somebody who's actually an expert in the field, where if you strip behind the layers, you know nothing. You don't know a lot about what you're talking about, but it feels like you do. It feels that that illusory superiority has kicked in and is running on all cylinders. And we feed this. We watch, we like, we comment, we share. We'll share that video with a friend. We'll share that video with a friend that we know, they'll like this video too. And then we also share that video with someone else who they need to hear this, and you're trying to prove a point, right? You're trying to persuade them. You're trying to say, yep, see, I'm right. We never did land on the moon. The video, did you see it? There's no wind. And you try to convince people of your point of view. But people, as they come down into the valley and they realize there's a lot more learning and questioning to have happen, they're quieting up and they're humbling themselves. And there's a calmness and gentleness to their understanding. They're learning more about the things that they don't know, right? They're not thinking more highly of themselves than they ought to. Paul says, yeah, don't do that. Sober up your judgment. Paul's essentially saying hey, I know what it's like, but thanks to the grace of God, I've made the change in my mind. Because when you can see yourself as God sees you, then you can start to see others as God sees them. Paul is doing something here. He's letting us know that when we can see as God sees, we will do as God does. And we can think about ourselves the right way. When we can think about ourselves in this context, this can radically change the way that we will treat other people. This will radically change the way we get in debates and conversations to where we have to stand on this hill that we're willing to die on because we know a little bit of information that have a whole lot of confidence about. It should change the way we debate, change the way that we interact, change the way that we disagree, that we can actually lean in to meet people where they're at. And so what do we do? What do we do? Paul lets us in on some basics. And in your notes here, in Colossians 3, we're going to talk through these basics. But I had a hunch, I had a feeling that I might get a little excited about some of this because I, like many of you, have been impacted by people who live on Mount Stupid, and I myself have been there plenty of times, more times than I care to admit. And so I've got some great context of Paul gives us some great context of what do we do with this? How do we combat this? How do we walk through this? And we're going to save that for next week. I'm gonna leave a little cliffhanger for you here because as we jump in, and here's what we're gonna do, and I want you to know this for next week. If you are, like some of you I know, you're like, I'm not really on social media. And some of you are like, I'm not really off social media, like you're literally on it right now. Okay, I know there's the spectrum here, but if you have some things, next week we're gonna go through what Paul says to make this practical. But if you have also some things like, we wanna take some time, we're gonna watch a few TikToks together next week and look at some of the things that are being thrown out there. And maybe they're right, and maybe they're not. Maybe we can lean in with curiosity. Maybe we can learn something from it. I'm not sure where this is gonna go because this is in your hands. And so if you have a video, if you come across something, I want you to share it with us. Send it to myself, send it to someone on our staff, send it to our own Imagine Church. We're just on Instagram. We don't have the TikTok yet, but send it to us because we wanna address some real things, some real questions that you have. That. So next week, we are going to talk about some nuts and bolts on how to remedy this, how to live counterculturally in a world that illusory superiority is just prevalent, in a world where people on the peak of Mount Stupid get a loudest voice as an actual expert. How do we navigate the complex times that we live in? I think it's fascinating and it's helpful for us as followers of Jesus. And so the last thing I want to say is this, is if you're here today and you're like, I'm not sure what I believe. I'm not sure what to believe. This is why something as simple as that little Bible bookmark that we gave you with a reading plan for 2 weeks, this is why I don't need you to take something that Tony says up here and have it impact like oh, well, Tony said it, that's gospel. But go home and study for yourself. Go read it for yourself. If you want to have a conversation with someone that you came with, that comes to church with you, do that. Dig deeper. Lean in with curiosity. It's okay if you have more questions than you do answers. We love that as part of our culture here, okay? Because we're going to lean into the things of God, and we're not afraid of the questions that might come up along the way. So take that bookmark with you, take it home, and lean in. And if you're here today and you're like, I want to start this journey of faith, then we're going to sing one song and we're all going to consider our next steps. But I want you to consider what that means to you to begin this journey of faith. Say, you know what? I don't have it all figured out. I can admit that I don't know a lot. Maybe you're down in that bottom left corner. You no knowledge, no confidence. And maybe that's right where God wants to meet you. Maybe you're at a spot where you're like, actually, I have a whole lot of confidence in things I don't know much about. And you can admit that you've been on the mountaintop for a while. And you want to have God help you come down to reality. And say, God, I want to give my life to you. I want to put my trust in you. I want to put my hope in you. Because the voices in my feed and the things that I've heard and the faith that was handed to me at once from either my family or that event that I went to, I've just always questioned it. But today's the day where you can say, God, I don't know all the answers, but I'm putting my trust in you. I'm taking a step in your direction. Jesus, the very first thing he did on this planet when he started his public ministry is he went around to some people that you would have never expected and he said, hey, would you follow me? Would you give up your way, your thinking? Would you just begin to follow me? And they did it. And they didn't have all the answers. They didn't even know that Jesus was Lord. But they followed him and it changed their life forever because it put them on a path and a trajectory of learning and growing through their Creator. And God invites you into that process to follow him. So in this last moment before we sing this last song, would you do this with me just across the room? Would you just bow your head, close your eyes? And I want us to pray together. And all of us need to consider what our next step is. But if you're here and you recognize, like, I need to take that step to walk in that direction, pray with me now. God, I choose you. I choose to put my trust and my faith in you. And I don't have it all figured out. And I have wandered and done things my way. I've tried this and I've tried that, but God, I'm at the bottom of the mountain right now, and I just need something. I need you. And God, would you meet us here as we take a step in your direction? Some of us for the very first time, some of us just for the first time in quite a while that we've said, God, I want to walk in your direction. And so we choose you now. God, would you be our Lord? Would you be our leader? Would you be our example in the way that we live our lives? And then God, for everyone else in the room that's been maybe following you for a while, but maybe we've been somewhere on the mountaintop or somewhere on the hillside, and we recognize that we're kind of just stuck in our way, and we haven't leaned in with curiosity, and we haven't actually engaged, but we've just kind of operated out of certainty, and we want other people to believe just like we believe and do things and behave the way that we behave. God, would you help us to take a step in your direction? Whether that step is just to come back next week to learn some of the tools of how to do that, or the step is even right now saying, God, I surrender my life once again to you in your ways. I've been ignorant. I want to learn and I want to grow. I want to lean into the things of God, and I want to meet people right where they're at and not view myself more highly than I ought to.